Hello and welcome aboard, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Captain Gibbs, joined by some lovely friends here. We've got Lord Pfeiffer.
Hello.
Valley. And Mackenzie.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about games that we played in 2017 and, whether they were the new games or just what we did in 2017 as far as gaming. So, let's just start this off, and I'll start it off by saying I didn't really play a lot of 2017 games, in all that honesty, except for like Nier, because that came out in 2017, at least last what I wrote down, anyways. But and They Are Billions, along with A Hat in Time, which are three very different games, but not quite relevant to each other that much. I just couldn't find anything that was relevant, or not relevant, of interest in this year, as far as like my cup of tea, because I'm more into strategy stuff personally. What about you, Mr. Pfeiffer?
There wasn't really any games out there. The only game that I had a little bit of fun that came out this year was that colonial survival game, just because it was Minecraft with slaves.
That came out this year?
Yeah, that came out only like 6 months ago.
Oh, okay. Well, not this year, but yeah, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last year.
2017.
2018 now.
2018.
It's just, though, everything just seems bland lately. Everyone's doing the same exact game. Like, Wolfenstein was pretty much the same exact game as the last Wolfenstein, and except it just had more SJWs in it for New Colossus.
Yeah, it wasn't particularly well written. Granted, the first one wasn't well written either, but at least it was more serviceable in my opinion. My problem was how hammy it was with the Hitler scene. Does anybody remember the Hitler scene in number 2?
I didn't play it, but I did see it, and holy shit.
So you know how in Wolfenstein 1, you get to kill Hitler because he turns into like a fucking war cyborg thing?
Yeah,
Yep.
Mecha
Hitler. And it's like this cool little boss fight. Well, instead of making like, it's a cool boss fight with Hitler, they're like, no, let's just really ham up how much of a crazy evil person and psychopath he is. And so he's just like urinating and vomiting everywhere, and it gets really old as he's starting to like just have people shot in the head, and it's like, okay, come on, move along. We got it. Like, yeah, you should point out he's bad, but can we have a boss fight or something? And it's like, nope, wasted opportunity. And I was like,
something about he was trying to make a movie and he thought you were acting the whole time.
yeah, it's pretty meh. Overall, Wolfenstein 2 was just really a disappointment. It's also quite short, in my opinion.
Oh look, Bubbles woke up.
Oh, well, maybe the late joiner will wish to join us. Mm-hmm.
Let me see. The only other game I can really think of that I played was the Total War? Warhammer 2?
That wasn't out this year, was it?
That was 2017.
Yeah, that was this year.
Oh my god. I've already gotten so bored with that one. I thought that was 2016. I just sort of assumed.
No, Total War 1 was 2016.
Jesus Christ, they shit them out every year now.
I've got a whole 15 hours on Total War 2.
No wonder why they're so half-baked. They don't fucking let them bake any at all. That explains a lot. Jesus Christ. It's been a while since I've thought about Total War at all. What about you, Mackenzie? What have you been playing?
I ended up playing a lot, but it was a lot of disappointing sequels last year. I think that's... Nier ended up being one of the best ones. The remake of Crash Bandicoot, that wasn't bad.
I didn't play that because I didn't have a PS4. But it was good, huh?
It was alright, nostalgia was there, but platformers they need to be made really well nowadays.
Yes.
They've just lost that charm a bit. Tales of Berseria came out.
Oh, so good.
It's a good game. Divinity Original Sin 2.
Was that this year? I thought that was 2016.
Nope, that was this year. Divinity Sin came out this year.
Oh, shit.
A lot of fun, especially if you play it with friends.
I played a little bit by myself. I was kind of bored, so I imagine it was meant definitely to be played with a friend. If you want to get
the only problem is with friends, there's a lot of micromanaging and a lot of menuing and remembering where to go. It's not as bad as the original Sin 1, so
Yeah. At least there was an
deserve the praise it
improvement.
got. The sadness of Middle Earth Shadow of War. That was
See, that was kind of
pretty
fun at
disappointing.
first. I was really hooked on it when it first came out. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And then it got really, really stale after like the first, or was it second zone?
I thought it got really stale after only 3 hours of playing.
Like, at first I was having a good time. I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. And then you keep playing it and you're like, all right, I've done it all like 30 times in a row now. The same stuff.
I've done the
Yeah,
same
it's-
exact thing 10 times in a row.
And I've
There's no-
encountered the same orc like 4 times. Like, okay, there's not that many person. Either that, or my luck was really bad.
What I did like though is if the orcs killed you, they would eventually level up and become a commander and just like kind of wander away and be like start
Yeah,
leading.
but that
other
was a
orcs.
feature in the first one. Even it's still a cool feature. Don't get me wrong, but it's nothing new to the franchise. Or now that it is becoming a franchise, from what I can tell, because it definitely looks like they're going to make a third one or attempt to.
I think they've already said that they're working on the script.
I don't even think they work on the script. That writing was pretty. It wasn't really
The Neme-
canon, that's for sure. When it comes to the
The
tokens.
Nemesis system improvements were definitely good, but the game that surrounded it was a little bit
Mediocre.
yeah, and they upped its runtime to the point where not a lot of people wanted to actually stick around and finish the damn thing.
See, you gotta have that's the balance. Like, long games are good only if they're fun all the way through. Sometimes you gotta mix up the monotony, and I'm not talking about like mixing up the monotony in like a Call of Duty game where you go from being like running around shooting people to a railway shooter on a helicopter or something. Like, I'm talking about mixing up the monotony in like subtle things, different enemies, different variations, lore points, things to make it refreshing and interesting. Problem is you're fighting orcs over and over and over again, and it gets a little stale after a while. Even though there are different tribes. But the problem is I didn't really notice the difference between any of the tribes in that game.
It was just their banners had a little bit difference. That was
Yeah,
the
and
only
their
difference.
aesthetic was slightly different, but that was about it. Like, the personalities were the same. See, they should have had that Orc Nemesis personality system for each tribe, unique to each tribe. That way you don't have, like, I'm in this zone, and I go over to this zone, and I encounter the exact same orc with the same personality. It's like, oh, God.
I almost wanted to say I wanted to see a tribe made up of nothing like but orc archers almost and the crossbows. I think that would have been neat. Is there something like one tribe specializes in one type of combat or something?
Yeah, like, they have special units. Like, if they made tribes unique, so this tribe had, like, the best berserkers, and there's a certain gimmick to fighting each tribe, like, to make it unique and different and interesting. Problem is it was just a minor aesthetic difference that I didn't even know there was different tribes until after I got, like, halfway through the game. I was like, wait, there's more than one tribe? And I'm like, oh, I've been encountering this whole time. I didn't even fucking notice.
Yeah, so much like the first one, it had little replay value.
Very little. In fact, the problem with it so much so is it was too long. Like Mackenzie said. I'd never completed it.
Speaking of games that have no replay play was the Urban Empire game that came out earlier last year.
Urban Empire. What is that?
That was the game where you built up the city from like the 16th century, from like the 17th, 18th century all the way up to the modern era.
Yeah, I didn't even hear about that. Did it do
It
well?
it was fun the first time you play it, but every other time you play it, it's the same shit again. You have to deal with the politics of town, and you have to deal with this. It's always the same thing. There's nothing new. Even if all the different families that are supposed to specialize in something different about their city, they don't specialize in anything different.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't even hear about that. That's news to me, but it does sound like it didn't fare well.
It didn't. I got it just because it looked cool, and then I played it. I thought it was great the first time I played it, and then I tried playing it a different way, and you're just always running the same problem. You have to beat it the same way. The other two victory conditions are almost impossible because you always run out of money and go bankrupt and get taken out of office.
Well, makes sense. But yeah, in terms of other games, I can't think of. There was a couple actually. Never mind. Did anyone play Hat in Time?
No.
No, just you.
Nope.
Oh, God. Now, Mackenzie, you mentioned platforming being good again. A Hat in Time, unlike, what was that other one where there was like a chameleon character? God, I cannot recall the name. Either way, it was not worthy of remembering that much because it was kind of bad and meh-ish. Hat in Time, on the other hand, was actually pretty refreshing. It was more or less what you'd expect from a platformer, collectibles game. We got to go around and collect all the shit. But it was just kind of, cutesy, fun, and refreshing, and actually executed quite well as far as controls and how the character moved. It was actually, in my opinion, well executed. The visuals were a little bit lackluster and behind, but that hyper-stylization definitely kept it on par with, being good enough to be up there next to other games. Surprised me that it kind of faded out into obscurity. It got a lot of attention right away, especially with the Shadman, or Shadbase, or whatever that hentai artist name is, because he looted one of the characters. Shadbase, yeah, because it turned into a meme. It's kind of funny. He looted, I forget. It's a little bit weird because, the character's mildly young, but, details. I don't even want to think about it. But yeah. That was a good game. There was also another interesting game that Mackenzie and I were talking about, and I'm sure you guys are all aware of it now, too. It's actually extraordinarily popular, especially on streaming, is the roguelike game, They Are Billions, which is kind of it's a real-time strategy game, but it's executed in such a way that it's more like a roguelike in the sense that you have to, repel oncoming hordes of zombies, then you have zombies on the map already that you have to clear out to get to areas of resources. And it's got a pretty good economic system in which it encourages the fact that you need to constantly grow and go to certain areas. But it is procedurally generated, so each map creates sort of a unique approach. And sometimes that procedural generation could just be cancerous if you just get bad generated maps, which I've gotten a couple of. Have any of you tried that?
I actually haven't even heard of it.
They Are Billions. It's surprising you haven't heard of it. It's actually kind
It's
of popular.
on Steam
I'm
Early
also
Access.
surprised you haven't heard of it.
It is on early access, yeah, on Steam.
Wow.
It's pretty good. It's a good time waster, but once you get towards the end or you beat it, it does lose a lot of that replay value. Because for me, my problem that's personally though, because for me, roguelikes, once you get close to the end, if you can beat them or you get to a certain point, they lose all sort of. I lose sort of all interest in that kind of game. But I got, what was it? Let's see if we can't pull it up here in a different tab. How many hours of fun did I get up? They Are Billions. Well, that's not very many. I got only 3 hours of entertainment out of that. I feel kind of rejected, but I do remember those moments quite well. I do remember.
How much do you spend for the game?
More than I got out of it, I guess. That's for sure. But that's past that 2-hour refund limit, and it's been long enough. Pity. Oh well. I like real-time
perhaps
strategy,
the
but just
free
not
mode
that
will
kind.
bring you back when it gets released.
Maybe. Oh, well, I'll try it again when it gets closer to being finished, because early access. It's one of the things is you can play it early on, but if you enjoyed it and you didn't refund it, you're definitely just gonna want to sit on it, because playing it while it's constantly being updated, it kills it after a while for me. I don't know about you guys, but it gets old playing early access games.
It depends on the type of game. If it's like a city builder game, I don't mind because I like to see the new features coming in. I like to see how they completely change the game every step of the way. If it's not, I find it more just killing.
It's kind of like Subnautica. You guys heard of that one? That was not even in 2017.
Yeah, I've heard of
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Subnautica. It was a big failure because they never added in multiplayer and everything else.
Well, no, it's not a big failure. It's still a commercial success, I think. I'm going off my memory right now. It's well received. Problem with the game I have is the development's taken so long, and I've played it enough to the point where it's like any update they do now, even if they did multiplayer, I have like virtually no interest in it anymore. It's kind of boring. It's like Where's Waldo underwater. And once you realize that you're playing Where's Waldo underwater with some pretty basic survival mechanic systems, the game gets really stale really quick. It was kind of a cool game, though, to explore in VR. If those of you have VR, you definitely should check it out, because it's very pretty in VR. Runs
I
weird,
feel like
though.
that might cause nausea.
Well, if you have nauseous-based tendencies for things like VR, then yes, you're probably going to get nauseous. Another cool game that came out this year, though didn't really, is Fallout 4 VR. Now, Fallout 4 is one of the weakest Fallout titles in my opinion. However, Fallout 4 VR kind of refreshes it in a way that it feels like you could just pretend it's like a VR RPG and not a Fallout game, and you're actually kind of enjoying yourself with that.
Have you
Also
played
apparently
Skyrim
doubles as
VR
a-
too?
Skyrim VR is not out yet, I thought.
Oh, I thought it was out.
I don't think so. No, I think they're still working on that.
That I'm excited for.
That
is
should be really interesting.
that is either going to be awful or it's going to be great.
Or it's going to be somewhere in the between, because I feel like some parts are going to
They
be
better do the
awful.
bows like you can pull back the arrow, because that'd be
Yeah, I'm
fucking
really
cool.
hoping they change, like they change how the animations in first person work.
They're gonna have to for that kind of game.
Now, my only question, I wonder how magic's going to work in the game now.
I imagine you'll just cast a spell and then you'll just sort of like, click and shoot. It's pretty simple. Once you play Fallout VR, you'll sort of like understand like, I can kind of see how all games will work sort of similar in that way. It's an interesting take, but VR is kind of a niche thing.
I
I'm
feel
more
like
intrigued how they'll do,
VR
shouts.
will do a lot better probably 10 to 15 years from now.
Yeah, that's true. Because the
Once-
current stuff out, like the HTC Vive, technologically speaking, it's cool. But the problem with having like a little fucking TV so close to your face is it doesn't surprisingly hurt your eyes all that much, but it just looks weird. It looks slightly fuzzy and slightly weirdish.
That's because a lot of the companies even admit until they get a refresh rate of 90 frames per second, most people are going to have motion sickness with VR.
Yep.
And until they get that ratio all fixed out and everything else, we're just seeing the testing of it. Once it gets a little bit better, more companies start developing in it, more companies start making games in it, then you're going to start seeing a rise of VR.
Yeah. Once we start seeing some really cool games like that Star Trek VR one, which we are going to do. By the way, for those who aren't aware, it is also compatible without VR now, which is pretty cool. Because that means you could play Star Trek, but it's kind of basic. Like, I did dick around in it, and it's just like... That also came out this year. It was interesting. But it's
Kind
kind
of kind of good basic from what I've seen.
It's good basic, but it could use a little bit more complexity to it.
From what people have told me, it's kind of like Pulsar, except instead of everyone being spread out through the ship, everyone's in the same area.
Yep, you're all sitting at your little stations and you're typing away furiously at buttons. That's kind of cool. Now, I do hope eventually if they make a sequel, they explore the option to move around the ship a little bit more and perhaps visit other ships or perhaps be boarded or perhaps, do some combat on like a planet or something. That's a lot harder, but that would be cool. That would sort of pull out that whole Star Trek experience of like exploring stuff, because as it stands, you're just floating around in space.
Because then I know they have the classic Star Trek beam me up thing. They could leave the chief engineer on the ship to do that while the rest of the crew goes down to a planet.
Well, the engineer's got to
And
have
toward the
something to
end
do
of
with
it,
it. That's
you
gonna be
have
boring.
You have to target them and beam them back up.
Oh god, a little mini game or something.
Oh, that's a thing.
No, I'm saying like following up your thing. If they do let you move like down,
Well,
to
they
planets
should
with
do all
other
sorts of
ships.
cool stuff. Because
They
the
can
thing
do
is,
a lot with that.
Maybe like a little mini game to see if they beam up the right person or not.
now I
You
feel
have to
bad.
target them, and like if they're losing, you have to beam them up before they die.
So for people who are unaware with like Star Trek stuff, kind of like Mackenzie, you're not too caught up with Star Trek, right?
No.
That's okay. Star Trek is genuinely retarded, but I like it. I like it.
It's a good kind of retarded.
I only like the DS9 and the unpopular Voyager for some reason. That's unpopular. I understand, but that's the two stuff I like. The rest is all cancer, in my opinion. Especially the new movies; those are terrible. Ugh.
You mean the new movies that are insanely popular?
The new movies that are just terrible because fucking the writing is. I don't want to even delve into that.
The second one was just a rewrite of The Wrath of Khan.
But back to gaming. Fucking shut up, Wally. Yeah, no, I think that'd be cool to explore for a sequel. But yeah. And that's, I think, enough about VR. Because VR is kind of niche and there needs to be more stuff to explore. One last thing is, wouldn't it be cool? Now imagine this. If you could play like Warhammer tabletop or stuff like in a better way. Tabletop Simulator doesn't do an excellent job of making it work properly because we've tested out. But wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could play tabletop games in VR, like Warhammer or stuff like that? Without finicky things like Tabletop Simulator, like officially.
I feel like that.
Because then we could play
but
with each other from far
GW
away.
Will ever allow for a sanctioned game of it to happen.
Well, they'd make a lot more money, and they'd increase their fandom size. It's gonna be beneficial, in my opinion. Because the gaming side of that... Oh, wait, that's a whole nother can of worms right now I don't even want to delve into.
Well, I'm a tabletop player, and I know a lot of people that play the game, and they only want to play it in tabletop. They only want to go to stores.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, you know, the people who love the tabletop models, you know, they're going to keep buying the models because that's what they like. They like painting them. They like putting them together. I think that's cool, and I think that's awesome. Problem is nobody around here does that, and there's nobody that plays tabletop. So when I tried getting into that kind of gaming back in the day, it didn't work out. I built the models, and no one would play because no one lived around me that could play. And I had to drive like 4 hours to anywhere that could. And I was like, and even then, there aren't that many people there. It's like maybe 5 people. Like, Jesus Christ.
Doesn't Minnesota host one of the largest tabletop gaming things once a year? Like 120 people like show
Maybe
up
in
there?
the cities, but I don't live in the cities.
Mm.
And that's the same thing for me here. If there was an online version of it officially done, I'd definitely get into that.
Yeah, we could all play it what's a great example of an upcoming game even, this 2018? We have BattleTech.
They're also making a 4K Warhammer game right now that's going to have Necrons, Imperial Guard, Orcs, and Space Marines.
I think Arch has been super excited about that. He says it's going to be kind of like, he's hoping it's kind of like Civilization in a way, but with like Warhammer stuff.
From what I've seen of it, it almost looks like Civilization, but with Warhammer, with unique buildings, unique everything.
It could be cool. It'll be another game to keep our eye on this 2018. But back to one game that I want to get in real quick before we move on is BattleTech. You guys know what BattleTech is, right?
Oh,
Big
yes,
Warrior?
I played the tabletop.
I never got to because nobody plays around here. But
There's a big underground group of it trying to bring it back around where I live.
the nice thing is they're getting they've done a video game adaptation of the tabletop game. Like a complete video game adaptation, which is what BattleTech is. It's bringing the tabletop into a video game format. I sincerely hope that other wargaming companies think about that and try doing that too, because I think that's actually a really good idea. Digitizing games, because when it comes to communities and playing games, nothing is bigger and more larger than the internet and online communities, because it's a lot easier to connect with people across the globe than it is in your local area, depending on where you live, especially. As Mackenzie and I both know, living out in the middle of nowhere, being sad.
That is true.
Fight for just like I can drive an hour in any direction, hit 12 different game stores that will have players playing.
Same.
There's one game store, and it's like it's tiny. They've got like some stuff, and the rest you just gotta order in. It's not worth it.
The one that we had here actually just went out of business. So
Ooh.
That's
Damn.
unfortunate.
I know a lot of gamers are right now hating GW because they're trying to raise the prices. That's a whole another can of worms.
That's just kind of why I want it to be digitized, because I just can't be asked to. I don't have
Well, they-
space either
They'd
for
earn
a
so
model,
much more
sadly.
profit if they did that too, because so many more people could afford it.
Well, it's gonna have its upsides and it's gonna have its downsides. It's not gonna be purely beneficial, but I think the benefits of digitizing outweigh the benefits of, making the plastic models. But either way, that's a whole other subject, more dedicated to the lines of Warhammer, which is kind of interesting and kind of autistic, but not so as autistic as Star Wars or fucking Star Trek. Those two
No,
are
it's
pretty
pretty
fucking autistic,
autistic.
especially
It's pretty
nowadays.
autistic.
Now, Star Wars Battlefront 2. Let's talk about that game, because that's a game I'm playing right now.
Do we have to?
Yes, we do.
I honestly haven't really played it or watched anybody play it.
Have you played the new Battlefronts? Any of them?
Nope.
Have you played the old ones?
Yes, so I have
Okay.
the old ones. I was
old
playing
ones
them
were
earlier
glorious.
today.
This is a prime subject and a problem in gaming that we've been seeing a lot lately. Is remaking games that don't necessarily need a remake, that could do without a remake and could just be remastered, and that would be a far better solution than remaking it half the shell of its predecessor, an original version. The classic 2005 or 6 release of Star Wars Battlefront 2 still has more mechanics, more features, and more classes, and just quite generally a better, well-rounded game and paced game than the current one. It's just kind of meh. It's meh. I miss the old one. I would pay for a remaster of the old one just to get it HD or retextured or remodeled.
Well, part of that goes by coming is because the company now controls Star Wars. George Lucas used to be a little bit crazy with his quality control with his video games. He wanted really good story, really good everything, and he didn't care if he lost money on the game because of that.
Well, there have been a few bad Star Wars games here and there. But the N64 had quite a few titles that I actually thoroughly enjoyed. There was that one where you could pilot all sorts of vehicles.
Yeah.
Then there was it Rogue Squadron?
Oh, Rogue Squadron.
Yes,
The
that
nostalgia.
would evolve into the best Star Wars game franchise of all time.
Then there was Republic Commandos.
Republic Commandos, incredible.
Then you get the
X-Wing,
sequel Imperial
TIE Fighter,
Commandos.
X-Wing TIE Fighter. Shadows of the Empire.
Shadows of the Empire. Oh god, I played that way too much as a little kid.
It was so
Empire at
good.
War.
Empire at War. Galactic
Empire War.
Battlegrounds.
Galactic Battlegrounds. Yeah, the Star Wars game franchise has been a
KOTOR
huge
1 and
hit.
2.
KOTOR, yeah, and can't forget about that. Even SOTOR, the bastard child.
Oh,
Poor
it's
thing.
not nearly as good. It's the Bastard Child. They actually call the Jedi Knight campaign KOTOR 3.
It is considered to be the third. If they make a fourth, a standalone one, that will be the storyline.
Which is cancer. But that's
I mean,
okay,
Star Wars
'cause we
has
still have 1 and
Star
2.
Wars is one of those franchises that has just some pretty well-rounded games. Like Star Trek and Warhammer have some pretty terrible fucking games and
we
video
can't
games.
forget Jedi Knight, the Jedi Knight series.
The sword dueling in that was retarded and glorious.
But it was such a good storyline.
It was.
Jedi-
I think the
Jedi
problem is the companies themselves. Warhammer is owned by GW, and GW is very sketchy when it gives it a game licenses. They only started really giving out game licenses last year.
No, they've been giving
everybody
out for a while lately, and they've been giving them to random schmucks here and there. I even see some stuff, video games popping up on the mobile stuff, because I keep my eye on that when I'm bored. Just look at that, see what they're up to. They make a lot of mobile games for a fucking tabletop company. Just saying, mobile games are fucking cancer. Ugh.
Well, they only really started doing that for the last 2 years. Before then, there would be like nothing, really, except for like maybe 1 or 2 games.
Yeah. So what else has everyone else been playing? I mean, besides outside the realms of 2017, what games did you play, and why did you play them? Was there just a lack of anything that met or fulfilled that requirement? Because myself, for example, I have found myself playing a lot of strategy games and RTS-based games because there hasn't been anything good on that front for
Honestly, I've
years.
been kind of going back to the early 2000s for a lot of games. Like, I've been playing a lot of Red Alert. I've been playing Command & Conquer games all over again just because I still find them fun, and they have a lot of replayability.
Yeah, the early 2000s was actually a pretty good golden era of gaming.
And I've been playing a lot of... I even played Caesar 3, which came out in 1999, and it still is good. The graphics are pretty bad.
1994 to 1999 has some pretty fucking interesting old school games on that fucking time period. You got the Command & Conquer franchise. You got all sorts of shit.
Stronghold.
Stronghold. Oh, that was good.
I even like Stronghold 1 and 2. I didn't really like
Well, no.
Crusaders or anything that came after it.
What?
You're a
Crusaders
heretic.
came after Stronghold 1.
Crusader 1 was before Stronghold 2.
Yeah, it was on the same engine as 1. Look, I didn't like Stronghold 2. I like Stronghold I like
didn't
Stronghold,
like how
Stronghold
autistic
Crusader.
they made Stronghold 2 with like the shit that happens within your keep and how you have to rank up your title. And then suddenly there's rats.
That
I
got a
also
little
like
retarded.
Stronghold Legends. Had anyone else remember that? It was off
Oh, I
the
remember
ones-
Legends.
I like
yeah, it was off the
Legends.
ones.
Legends was interesting.
you either played as King Arthur or you played as Dracula, and you actually had specialty units, and it was off of one's engine.
Or you could play those ice Germans.
Yes, you're
The
ice
ice
giant
Germans.
Germanic people.
Does anyone remember Rise of Nations?
Yes.
Rise of Nations, Rise of Legends?
Oh yeah,
That was fun.
Majesty.
We're gonna have to beat Mackenzie later. Mackenzie, you can mention games too, my boy. I know we're mentioning a lot of RTSs. Majesty was a great game, by the way.
Remember the Overlord games?
You got to play as a GM pretty much. It was fucking awesome.
Oh, it was so great.
You were like tax collector. I can't even do it right.
That was such a good game because you couldn't control where the heroes went. You had to place bounties and convince them to go there.
Yeah, and so if enough heroes would die or a monster be too hard and you pay too little, like fuck that, I'm not going to kill it.
Yeah, if enough heroes died, you'd have to put like a 10,000 gold bounty to make them go there.
That was
And how
kind
they'd
of
interact because you'd have like priests and clerics following around warriors and healing them.
that was cool. I still prefer the original Majesties over the sequel.
Mm.
I didn't even know they made a sequel.
Call me an old school boy.
It was
Yeah,
kind
they did. They made a sequel
s-
and an expansion.
They made
Another
a
made an
sequel,
expansion.
but they started running out of money.
I don't know anything about that. I just remember there was a sequel and they made an expansion, and Mackenzie killed it.
Damn it, Mackenzie.
Yes. Blame me.
Mackenzie's like, oh my god, how they know?
Mackenzie's
Mackenzie's actually a spy for EA. Oh no.
You know, it was also a fun game that you could play as you played as the evil character was the Overlord series.
Overlord.
Yeah, you played as the thing. You would control minions. You get
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Overlord was cool. It was kind of like Pikmin in the way how you controlled stuff, which was kind of cool. But you were evil, and you got to fuck bitches, quite literally.
Yes.
Oh god, I love that. You abduct, or not you abduct, but you just sort of like. Do you abduct them? I can't remember. You get
In the first one, after you do a certain amount of evil things, the people spree would try and please you, and they give you one free woman, and then you could go around abducting older women and have a minion just go around kidnapping them.
I did not know that, but I do remember that there was 2 female companions you could get, and basically one of them was like sold to you or given to you as tribute, so that you would stop tormenting them, and the other one was just sort of volunteer. But that was kind of an interesting little RPG game and strategy game, action RPG, you could say. Because you got your minions, you had your little character, and you had to rely on your minions to solve puzzles. And you had different types of minions for different sort of
and you needed
puzzles.
the resources from the creatures in the different areas.
Yep, to get their like little soul energy balls, and then you could summon new minions. Yeah, I remember that. They killed that franchise when they made that fucking isometric version, though. I heard about that. Raising
What,
Hell or
Overlord?
something.
Overlord 2?
Or not Overlord 2, the one after. Overlord 2 was pretty meh.
Let me see. It went Overlord 2, then it went Overlord Raising Hell.
Yep, that was the one that killed it.
And then they actually just made a
Hold
new
on.
one that's kind of like an RPG game that you're one of 5 candidates.
Hold on. Now, notice something. I've been noticing this too a lot when I've been playing through older games that get sequels and how they just sort of forget and lose touch with their base audience. For example, in the Command & Conquer franchise, which is a pretty good franchise, by the by, in my respective opinion, but as they went and continued to make Command & Conquers, they would slowly continually lose touch with what made Command & Conquer. Instead of improving and adding stuff to the formula, they would betray the formula. Much like Overlord's Raising Hell, except in the sense that number 4 for Command & Conquer turned into a fucking MOBA from an RTS. The same can be said for, Overlord. It went from an action RPG to sort of like a weird isometric-y sort of game that wasn't really at all what that franchise represented or was. We see this happening at a lot of other instances too. For example, Total War is another good example. Look at how they've been slowly changing from having depth and complexity. Now, granted, they have been making steps back on track, but we'll see in the next title. But it's just sort of like this interesting sort of occurrence that is seemingly... It's always been there, but I don't know why.
I really feel like
What is the obsession with betraying the core audience?
they want to try and give a different gameplay. Like a lot of people didn't like the full-on walled cities. You can surround it with 2 different armies, and you had to fight with your one army inside the city.
Where the fuck do you see somebody saying that they didn't like that? Because seriously, who the
on the Total War forums and stuff.
The forums are just a bunch of like CA dick loving bastards. Like anyone there is mostly just gonna kiss ass, because they block and censor people who they don't agree with. Because instead of being a good company and taking criticism, it's always good to silence your critics, because why not? Why not?
Yes, make your game infallible and let everybody get mad by learning it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But you made money, so who cares? Lol XD.
Lol XD got him.
I also feel like I feel like they try and change the games. Like with Command and Conquer, it was a little bit of changes for each edition, trying to give the gameplay a different feel. Because if they just made Command and Conquer like 1, 2, 3, and like everything was identical gameplay, it would be boring. But
No, I agree with you there. There's nothing wrong with mixing up the formula, except when you do it to a point where it becomes toxic. And an example of toxic mixing up the formula is look at Command and Conquer. Let's compare Command and Conquer, let's compare the last one, Red Alert 3, to number 4. You'll notice it goes from base building and about, building and gathering resources, which is a core philosophy in Command and Conquer. Now, granted, they had mixed up in the past before with Renegade, which made it into a shooter, switching genres. However, it didn't particularly hurt the franchise as far as I recollect. Now, this is a bit rusty on the memory part, because I was like a little kid when I played that. But it was kind of an interesting sort of way to explore the game from a different angle. However, when you sort of like completely throw out the lore, but 4 had all sorts of problems. See, the problem was 4 was also boring. So that also is a key factor here.
4 was originally going to be released as an MMO RPG, like RTS type thing. They were going to try and change it up for that. The company decided not to do that and kind of just scrapped it.
Well, either way, that's a bad idea, because that's not what makes Command and Conquer Command and Conquer. What makes a Command and Conquer game is the whole way they approach the base building. You have your research building. They have different little things that they've been doing over time. Like when your generals would level up, or you'd level up, you'd get new powers and abilities. They added super weapons, all sorts of other stuff. Super weapons are always from the base, because the ion cannon and the Hand of Nod. In the first one, Tiberian Dawn,
the nukes.
Yeah, no, that is it. The Hand of Nod is the nuke.
Yep. Well, I was also going off Red Alert 2 and everything.
Yeah, no, they've had their super weapons. They've had all sorts of things to mix up the minutia, like garrisoning of buildings in Red Alert 2, which was a new feature, which made the ability to garrison buildings and fortify them, along with units having secondary abilities. And as the series progressed, like for example, generals, they implemented a new system where you would level up and get new powers and abilities. You could also garrison more vehicles. Now, granted, that was already in Red Alert 2, but there was different ways to approach it. Vehicles had different upgradable paths. And then Tiberian Wars, while it wasn't my favorite, it still took a lot of core mechanics and just continued to sort of develop it. It got a little bit stagnant there. It sort of stayed the same after Generals. And then Red Alert 3 kind of made units a little bit interesting, but it was kind of meh. And the problem was 4 didn't add or change anything to the formula. 4 just said fuck the formula and made a MOBA that had a cool idea on paper, which is the ability to move a base and build units, a sort of MOBA RTS. Now, while that sounded cool, the problem was in that game is unit preservation doesn't matter, because in that game, there are no resources. You can just build units at will. That means there's no punishment for losing units. And
Kibbs, I actually have to remind you, because of the movement and everything else, that reminded me of the game Universe at War. The one of the factions was a move around faction. Their entire base was pretty much movable. It was on the walkers.
Oh yeah, I remember. The red one.
A lot of people complained about that, and that came out a year before Command and Conquer 4 came out. And
Universe at War didn't do well because it was just kind of an average RTS in the time of when there was great RTSs. It came out at an inopportune time because he also had things like Company Heroes at the time, if I remember right, which were pretty fucking innovative games. Relic was pumping out fucking great games like left and right back in those days. And you had all sorts of other cool and interesting, innovative RTSs like Rise of Legends and other things. Granted, Universe at War came out towards the butt end, but that was sort of towards Supreme Commander, which is another great RTS franchise. This is turning into too much of a certain genreization, so we're going to wrap that little sub bit here up.
Any good first-person shooters anyone's played or anything like that?
First-person shooters.
Battlefield 1 I'd played a lot.
Dusk. Anyone heard of that?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a pretty cool. It's nothing like super fancy or special, but it's just a sort of a old school shooter back, just retro style. It's back to sort of like a, I guess you could say sort of a Quake 2 kind of vibe, Quake 2-ish. Reminds me of Quake 2 in particular, which is kind of fun. You know, it's got that whole element of sort of mixes in Blood, which is another old shooter, which is very retro-esque. That was back in the DOS days, if I recollect correctly. But those were pretty good games. And Dusk was not too bad. In fact, that one isn't even out. That's coming out in 2018. If you pre-order now, though, you get access to episode 1 and 2, if I remember right. But yeah, it's a pretty good shooter. Battlefield 1 was all right last year. Did that come out last year?
It came out, I think, late 2016.
I think
okay.
it came out like December 25, December 25th or 24th, 2016, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was late 2016.
Like, it was pretty much 2017, I would say.
Battlefield 1 was cool. Problem was
It wasn't an accurate World War I game, but you can't expect that from DICE.
Problem was it was just Battlefield.
It was
And,
way too many machine guns.
The problem with it being Battlefield is it's kind of a formula that's gotten old.
Mm.
And it hasn't really evolved. Granted, they tried some interesting mechanics and weapons, which were kind of cool, like the behemoth war machines and the chemical-based weaponry, which was kind of interesting. But they just really wasn't enough to save it, even with that high budget for me. The campaigns were pretty bad. As
It did
typical
bring
in
it back
Battlefield 1.
from the flop that was Hardline, though, I gotta say.
Well, that's not even really a Battlefield game, though it calls itself it for some reason.
You know what
but
used to be a
it
fun
was.
game group was the Arma games for first-person shooters, really.
Arma was good until Arma 3 and 2.
I like Arma 3.
The only Arma I actually like is Combat Operations. The rest are kind of meh to me. I just, couldn't quite get into it. Combat Ops, though, is kind of fun, just the way it functioned.
Mm.
I know I'm weird. It's got less features and less things than the new ones. I like
Yeah.
it more. I just like the way it felt. It felt much more authentic. I don't know.
I liked Arma 3 just because of the realism it takes. Like, if you reload your gun, that magazine that you put away is not magically reloaded.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, it's realistic. It's how, warfare works. Your magazines don't fucking magically fill up with bullets while you're just putting them back in their little sleeves.
Didn't Dead Space also have that?
What do you mean?
Well, if you unloaded your gun in Dead Space, if there was bullets left in that mag, you lost those bullets.
I don't think so.
No,
Not in-
they only did that for the first Dead Space. Everyone after the first one didn't do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because the Dead Space franchise went from being about horror to more of an action horror to more of just action towards the end.
Yeah, it was only in one, and I did like that feature, but at the same time, when you know there's an enemy up ahead that takes 12 shots and you have like 6 shots in your gun and you really need to load it, it does take away from that feel too.
It was interesting. I didn't particularly mind it. But yeah, no, Dead Space was all right. As a game, it was super cool. The writing was the interesting part for me. I thought it was fun. And then it got a little bit weird with the whole,
Cult.
spoiler alert, the 9 world thing with the 9 moons or whatever.
You know what that reminded me of was the Star Wars virus. It was never in a video game, but it was a book series that had like a virus that would infect entire planets and turn them into like
Everybody's got to have their zombies. Ugh.
Yep.
It's kind of a thing that's getting a little bit overdone. I think it's been overdone for a little while now.
Well, the zombie genre was like the vampire genre. It's like being phased out again. It'll come back in like 5 or 10 years, and then the werewolf genre will kick back and like another version of horror.
On zombies, are you guys ready for Metal Gear Survive?
What?
Get out.
What?
Get out of here.
What is this?
No. I know exactly what he's talking about. Metal Gear Survive or whatever it's called. It's not called Survive, is it?
Yes, Metal Gear Survive.
Why? That's such a lazy-ass name. Isn't it the one with, like, Snake or something, or Boss Man, or they get teleported to, like, some alternate
It
dimension?
seems to be like an alternate reality where they just get vacuumed into the
Because
world.
reasons.
Because reasons.
It looks bad.
Surprise.
Look, Hideo Kojima, I'm not a big fan of his writing. I think he's a pretty good game designer, or when it comes to, like, that stuff, but I think his writing is pretty flawed. But that's just retarded. Like, that is retarded. And now that Hideo Kojima, God, I butcher his name every fucking time, I swear, is off the team, you know it's gonna fall face flat. Because that's kind of his passion project, if I recall correctly, right?
It was his passion project at the first game. After that, not so much.
Oh, it's only the first game he wanted to do.
Yeah, he doesn't like doing sequels, but they kind of push him into it, it seems.
He didn't like doing sequels until he saw the paycheck for the sequels.
Yeah, that is true. See, people often like to defend people all the time when they like say, "Well, he didn't like doing it, but he still did it."
Well, he did it because he needed money. Like at the end of the day,
Of course, he did it because he needed money. I mean, he can't work for fucking free. But it's just something to note. It's just how the world works.
Have you guys also know it's always a sequel now or a sequel of a sequel? No one
Look,
ever.
I got nothing wrong with sequels or prequels or anything like that. The problem I have is making good prequels and good sequels. For example, Star Wars Disney and Disney games, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and by proxy, Star Wars Battlefront or Star Wars the movies, are terrible movies. They don't really represent the Star Wars universe or any sort of the core philosophies in those areas. They're just kind of like, hey, I'm existing and I'm going to be a thing. Why do you exist is what you ask. Because when you make something, you always got to ask yourself, why am I making this? And when Disney was asking when they asked themselves, why am I making Star Wars Episode 7?
Money.
The answer was, yep, exactly, money. There was no other rhyme or reason to make a sequel to something that didn't need a sequel.
Shh, we don't talk about Episode 8.
Look, whatever happens after Episode 6 doesn't count for me. Same for games.
I was
The
so
rest of the
hopeful they
games
were
are
gonna touch
also
on like
cancer.
the Grand Moffs and everything from the expanded universe.
Too bad they're dead and they never
Yep.
existed.
You know what Disney also
Existed.
made hints at, though? Is they're thinking about bringing back the Yuzon Vaughn in a different series for 10, 11, 12.
Look, I don't even want to think about it anymore. I don't even.
Let me see. What else has really been happening in the game world lately?
Not much.
The big war over loot boxes. That's pretty
Oh,
much the
God.
highlight.
Pretty much.
It's sad that that's the fucking thing of relevance. It's like, what kind of cool, pushing, innovative games do we have? Loot boxes. It's like, oh, great.
Oh yeah, algorithms.
Loot boxes for cosmetics and shit is fine, but for
Yeah, no.
gameplay, holy fuck.
Look,
It's all about those
I have nothing
microtransactions.
against cosmetic-based DLC. I think that's great. I think that's awesome. Because, it provides an income for the artists that work in that company so they don't get fucking shafted because they can't afford to keep the artists
It
on board.
allows so much more creative license too.
That too. It allows,
Because it's optional stuff. It doesn't have to be in the game. People
it
can
doesn't
pay
have to be
for it if they
canon
like it.
either. So it can be sort of like, fluff breaking, depending on
Yeah,
what game.
or it can be the company accepting a bunch of memes that people have made.
That too.
Like
Accepting part of their own
Overwatch has
community's
taken that
culture.
route. With a lot of their skins lately, they've been accepting a lot of the memes people have made.
And that's a good route. Problem is loot boxes, in the sense of gameplay and gameplay mechanics, that give players distinct advantages over other players who do not possess them, is you create a
It's a pay gap. It's
pay
what
gap.
it is.
Yep, quite literally.
But the problem is a lot of companies are becoming, I want to say, just greedy lately in the game market. It's
Yeah,
gonna
and
cause a lot of these
it says
game-
it makes them think they can justify a subpar game too.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think it's more so greed as the fact that the cost of producing games has become cheaper. However, game companies at that same interval as games and stuff has become easier to produce and make, like CGI and different stuff, they've also increased the amount of effort and assets put into the game. So, despite it becoming cheaper to produce on paper, the more assets they poured into it has made it more expensive. This has sort of created a sort of weird problem in that regard, and their solution to solving that problem is more DLC, because they're just trying to make up so they can make profits. Because the company's out there to make profits, and I got nothing wrong with that. More power to you. The more profits a company makes, the better it does. The more games we get, the better games we should get. Technically, that's not always the case.
I'm not attacking DLC. Like, if it's like DLC that
Here's the
adds
thing about
on a
DLC.
different-
No, you're right. The point is, and I'm just trying to add to your point, is the quality content. It should always be at the heart and center of every DLC. Granted, I really wish they'd go back to the expansion pack days, but you know, can't be winish. But yeah, no. At the core of everything, it's all about the quality of content. It always has been. And the problem is the quality of content we got via DLCs, and especially in a lot of games, especially from EA in particular, for this particular instance, is it's all been shit.
And CA, you can't forget about CA as well.
CA is a pretty ass-cancerous company, too. Pretty schwindly. But who knows? Maybe they're on the path to redemption. We'll see. We'll see in the next title. We know they're certainly shafting the poor bastards who play Total War Warhammer, like ourselves. Ugh,
It makes me so sad.
$20 for a fucking nation. Oh my god. Incomplete games on launch. What is this? Pre-order DLC. Come on. I thought we talked about this. But now, see, the fascinating thing about Creative Assembly, and the most fascinating thing I think I've ever seen, is how they've been able to create such a hostile culture and community towards criticism. Criticism into like basic things like, you know, mechanics or glitches or anything for that matter. If you were to, per se, stalk the forums for a while, or, you know, even the Steam forums, even though Steam's a slightly cancerous place to be stalking, trust me, but you'll find that it's crazy how fanatical people can be when it comes to attacking critics who criticize games. It's like, I get it, you know, you love the game, like that's awesome. You being passionate about a game is great. That's phenomenal. Problem is when you're so passionate about it that you attack anyone who says, you know, maybe the game crashing is a bad thing. That becomes a problem, because once you start shutting up the critics who, you know, point out flaws or possible improvements, you're going to see that it's going to start to stagnate, because people are going to stop innovating because they're not getting feedback. People aren't asking for new features or mechanics or new implementations or patches or fixes. So certain things will be left broken or will be left the way they were, in the sense that the game won't continue to evolve, because every game franchise cannot stay the same for every sequel, because it will just get old and stale. It's just how it always has been. It needs to change, but it needs to not change too much, like you see with, you know, certain games like Command & Conquer 4 killing off the franchise, where they just literally break the franchise, you know. The thing is, you don't want to betray your core audience, and the problem is CA's kind of weird in that sense. Like they don't betray their audience, but at the same time they sort of swindle them, and they've gotten really good at it too. It's a bit of a shame, but you know, you just gotta wait for. I guess they gotta fuck up again, and then people will wake up like they did last time. Because every time they step in it, people are like, oh yeah, you've been doing all these things wrong, and criticism becomes okay again. Problem is then it just becomes too much criticism. You just never get the right balance.
Well, the problem was CA took away all the criticism, so if they ever allowed criticism to come back, they're going to get a whole shit ton of it at once from everybody.
Well, no, it won't be a shit ton. And it's not even Creative Assembly anymore. It's just the community. But I think Creative Assembly is at fault for the community because it's sort of been fostered that way. Because Creative Assembly does have a blacklist. And on their blacklist, they find people that don't preach the same values they preach or opinions on their game, etc., and they blacklist them to sort of suffocate them, to do their best to undermine their channel growth. But at the same time, they promote people and give early access to people who are... And this goes for more than Creative Assembly, by the way. Like, other companies do this shit all the time. EA, Relic did this with fucking Dawn of War 3, prime example there. They don't look for outside opinions or, anyone who would they deem hostile. I don't know how they do it. But either way, they put people on a blacklist. And I think it's a lot of companies more than just Creative Assembly. Because it's proven that it has been. Because you have companies like Relic who don't give out keys to pretty large, predominant Warhammer channels because of their, I don't know, because they might criticize it. And lo and behold, sometimes the criticisms are right. But, details. But yes. Wow, this conversation. We've been talking about all sorts of things.
Well, the gaming field is a giant...
No, I know. We're just getting our feet wet in terms of the podcast. But I think this was good. I think we're going to wrap it up here, though, because we're reaching the hour mark, and I want to keep these quite short for the beginning part, as we just sort of feel our way into how we're going to approach these. So, for
Games
those who
we're
are
looking forward to,
things
2018.
Yeah, no. We'll see. There's all sorts of topics and subjects we'll need to cover, but as we continue to work out how the Bickering Bunch podcast, now that we revived it, are going to work, we're going to sort of base it off of feedback. So any feedback we get, or what your guys thought, I'm talking to you people here with me now, what your guys' thoughts were, and then we'll just sort of iron out a more clear path and direction. I think this went well, though. Wouldn't you, Mackenzie, Mr. Quiet Pants? He's like, damn it. I don't play RTSs that much.
Wait, Mackenzie's still here?
God damn it. He's just teasing you.
Look,
You're
it happens.
grinding them expo.
You're too
It
old.
happened.
You play games that are well beyond my years.
Mackenzie, look. You little young puppy scuppy you. That's okay. We'll get to more modern games. Eventually.
Eventually. Diablo, anyone?
Just, we can't let Arch and Mackenzie be in the same room then, because you'll have young and then old dinosaur. That's right. Shots fired.
That's right. He just called Arch Warhammer a dinosaur.
He's a bit of a old man. But yeah, no, I think that's going to conclude today's episode. So, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you all next week, come Wednesday.